The frozen winds of Proxima IV howled across the barren plains as Captain Marcus Rhodes guided his cargo ship through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. The aging vessel, appropriately named Second Chance, groaned against the strain. Marcus had seen his share of desolate worlds in 15 years of independent hauling, but something about this one made his skin crawl. Proximity alert, the ship's AI announced, its monotone voice barely audible over the storm. Unknown craft detected. Crash signature present. Marcus leaned forward, adjusting the scanner's frequency. Show me. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the twisted remains of what appeared to be a small transport vessel. Its design was unlike anything he'd encountered before. Sleek, almost organic in its construction, with a hull that seemed to shimmer despite the damage. Life signs, he asked, already plotting a course toward the wreckage. 1. Faint. Marcus cursed under his breath. The smart move would be to call it in and keep flying. Salvage rights weren't worth the risk of getting involved in whatever caused that crash. But something about that single life sign tugged at him, an echo of a promise he'd made long ago. Log the deviation, he muttered, banking the ship toward the crash site. Standard rescue protocols. The landing was rough, the storm battering Second Chance as Marcus set her down 50 meters from the wreckage. He sealed his environment suit, checked his emergency kit, and stepped into the howling wind. The crashed vessel looked even stranger up close. Its hull bore no identifying marks, no registration numbers, just smooth, iridescent metal that pulsed weakly with some internal power source. Marcus activated his scanner, following the life sign reading toward what appeared to be the ship's main cabin. The entry hatch had been torn open, either from the impact or by someone trying to escape. Inside, emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow over the destruction. Marcus moved carefully, his boots crunching on shattered crystal and twisted metal. The life sign led him to a small compartment near the ship's core. There, curled in what looked like a stasis pod, was a child. Not a human child. The being was small, perhaps equivalent to a 6-year-old human, but its skin was a deep indigo, marked with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with its shallow breathing. Delicate fins lined its arms, and its closed eyes were large, curved upward at the corners. Marcus's scanner confirmed what he could hardly believe. The child was alive, but barely. The stasis pod had protected it from the worst of the crash, but its systems were failing. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, knowing his words probably meant nothing to the alien child. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The child's eyes flickered open, revealing irises that shimmered like liquid silver. It spoke, a series of musical tones that Marcus couldn't understand, but the fear in its voice needed no translation. "It's okay," he soothed, slowly reaching toward the stasis pod's release mechanism. "I'm here to help." The child watched him, those silver eyes tracking his every movement. Then, to Marcus's surprise, it reached out with a small, 6-fingered hand and touched his visor. The bioluminescent patterns on its skin brightened, and in that moment, Marcus felt something. A presence, a consciousness brushing against his own. Images flashed through his mind. A grand city of crystal spires, a woman with the same indigo skin wearing ceremonial armor. Explosions, fear, escape. The child was showing him memories, trying to communicate. "You're a long way from home," Marcus said gently, "but we're going to fix that." He carefully lifted the child from the pod, noting how light it was, how its skin seemed to ripple with colors in response to his touch. The storm was getting worse. They needed to reach Second Chance before conditions deteriorated further. As they made their way back to his ship, Marcus felt the child trembling against him. Whether from cold, fear, or injury, he couldn't tell. But with each step, those small fingers gripped his suit tighter, and the presence in his mind grew stronger, filled with a desperate mix of terror and hope. Back aboard Second Chance, Marcus quickly carried the child to the medical bay. His ship wasn't equipped for exotic physiologies, but the basic diagnostic systems should at least give him some idea of what he was dealing with. Run full bioscan. He ordered the ship's eye. Priority 1. As the scanner hummed to life, the child finally spoke again, this time producing sounds that seemed to be an attempt at human speech. "Nix," it said, pointing to itself with a trembling hand. Marcus smiled behind his visor. "Nex, is that your name?" The child nodded, the movement jerky but deliberate. The learned gesture, Marcus realized. Nix had encountered humans before. The frozen winds of Proxima IV howled across the barren plains as Captain Marcus Rhodes guided his cargo ship through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. The aging vessel, appropriately named Second Chance, groaned against the strain. Marcus had seen his share of desolate worlds in 15 years of independent hauling, but something about this one made his skin crawl. "Proximity alert," the ship's AI announced, its monotone voice barely audible over the storm. "Unknown craft detected. Crash signature present." Marcus leaned forward, adjusting the scanner's frequency. "Show me." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the twisted remains of what appeared to be a small transport vessel. Its design was unlike anything he'd encountered before. Sleek, almost organic in its construction, with a hull that seemed to shimmer despite the damage. "Life signs?" he asked, already plotting a course toward the wreckage. 1. Faint. Marcus cursed under his breath. The smart move would be to call it in and keep flying. Salvage rights weren't worth the risk of getting involved in whatever caused that crash. But something about that single life sign tugged at him, an echo of a promise he'd made long ago. "Log the deviation," he muttered, banking the ship toward the crash site. Standard rescue protocols. The landing was rough, the storm battering Second Chance as Marcus set her down 50 meters from the wreckage. He sealed his environment suit, checked his emergency kit, and stepped into the howling wind. The crashed vessel looked even stranger up close. Its hull bore no identifying marks, no registration numbers, just smooth, iridescent metal that pulsed weakly with some internal power source. Marcus activated his scanner, following the life sign reading toward what appeared to be the ship's main cabin. The entry hatch had been torn open, either from the impact or by someone trying to escape. Inside, emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow over the destruction. Marcus moved carefully, his boots crunching on shattered crystal and twisted metal. The life sign led him to a small compartment near the ship's core. There, curled in what looked like a stasis pod, was a child. Not a human child. The being was small, perhaps equivalent to a 6-year-old human, but its skin was a deep indigo, marked with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with its shallow breathing. Delicate fins lined its arms, and its closed eyes were large, curved upward at the corners. Marcus's scanner confirmed what he could hardly believe. The child was alive, but barely. The stasis pod had protected it from the worst of the crash, but its systems were failing. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, knowing his words probably meant nothing to the alien child. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The child's eyes flickered open, revealing irises that shimmered like liquid silver. It spoke, a series of musical tones that Marcus couldn't understand, but the fear in its voice needed no translation. "It's okay," he soothed, slowly reaching toward the stasis pod's release mechanism. "I'm here to help." The child watched him, those silver eyes tracking his every movement. Then, to Marcus's surprise, it reached out with a small 6-fingered hand and touched his visor. The bioluminescent patterns on its skin brightened, and in that moment, Marcus felt something. A presence, a consciousness brushing against his own. Images flashed through his mind. A grand city of crystal spires, a woman with the same indigo skin wearing ceremonial armor, explosions, fear, escape. The child was showing him memories, trying to communicate. "You're a long way from home," Marcus said gently, "but we're going to fix that." He carefully lifted the child from the pod, noting how light it was, how its skin seemed to ripple with colors in response to his touch. The storm was getting worse. They needed to reach Second Chance before conditions deteriorated further. As they made their way back to his ship, Marcus felt the child trembling against him. Whether from cold, fear, or injury, he couldn't tell. But with each step, those small fingers gripped his suit tighter, and the presence in his mind grew stronger, filled with a desperate mix of terror and hope. Back aboard Second Chance, Marcus quickly carried the child to the medical bay. His ship wasn't equipped for exotic physiologies, but the basic diagnostic systems should at least give him some idea of what he was dealing with. Run full bioscan, he ordered the ship's eye. Priority 1. As the scanner hummed to life, the child finally spoke again, this time producing sounds that seemed to be an attempt at human speech. "Nix," it said, pointing to itself with a trembling hand. Marcus smiled behind his visor. "Nex, is that your name?" The child nodded, the movement jerky but deliberate. A learned gesture, Marcus realized. Nix had encountered humans before. "I'm Marcus," he said, touching his chest. "You're safe now." The scanner completed its analysis, displaying results that confirmed Marcus's growing suspicion. Nix wasn't just lost. Someone had tried very hard to make sure the child didn't survive this crash. The ship's damage pattern wasn't consistent with an accident. Marcus looked down at Nix, who had begun to drift into an exhausted sleep, those silver eyes fighting to stay open. Someone had tried to murder this child, and that someone might still be looking. "Well, kid," he murmured, initiating the ship's launch sequence, "looks like we're in this together now." As Second Chance lifted off, leaving the wreckage behind, Marcus knew his life had just become infinitely more complicated. But watching the gentle rise and fall of Nix's chest, seeing those bioluminescent patterns pulse with each peaceful breath, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. Sometimes the right choice was also the dangerous one. And Marcus Rhodes had never been good at walking away from someone who needed help, even if that someone came from among the stars. Dr. Juniper Wade had seen her share of unusual patients during her years as a frontier medic, but the small being curled up on her examination table was something entirely new. The child's indigo skin seemed to ripple with patterns of light that shifted with each breath, creating mesmerizing displays that danced across the medical bay's sterile walls. "Her biology is fascinating," Juniper murmured, studying the readings on her diagnostic panel. "The bioluminescence appears to be a form of communication, possibly even a survival mechanism." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Can you help her?" "She's stable," Juniper replied, adjusting the environmental controls. "The stasis pod protected her from serious injury, but she's suffering from severe emotional trauma." "Whatever happened on that ship?" She trailed off, shaking her head. Nix stirred, those remarkable silver eyes fluttering open. The moment she saw Marcus, the lights beneath her skin brightened, forming intricate patterns that spread across her arms and face. A greeting, perhaps, or a sign of recognition. "Hey there, Starlight," Marcus said softly, approaching the table. "Feeling better?" Nix reached out, touching his hand with delicate six-fingered precision. Immediately, both Marcus and Juniper felt it, a gentle presence in their minds, carrying images and emotions rather than words. Gratitude, trust, but also fear, deep and persistent. "She's telepathic," Juniper breathed, fascinated. "Not just empathic, she's actually sharing memories." Through the mental connection, they saw fragments of Nix's life before the crash. A magnificent city built from living crystal, vast chambers where hundreds of her kind communicated through synchronized light patterns, and always, at the center of these memories, a tall, regal figure with ceremonial armor and eyes that matched Nix's own. Her mother, Marcus realized. "She's showing us her mother." The images shifted, turning dark. Explosions, betrayal, a desperate flight through unfamiliar space. Nix's small body trembled, the lights beneath her skin dimming to a frightened pulse. "That's enough for now," Juniper said firmly, administering a mild sedative. "She needs rest." As Nix drifted back to sleep, Marcus pulled up the ship's star charts. Those buildings, that architecture, I've seen something similar before in the Sethian Empire. The Sethians. Juniper's eyes widened. But they're isolationists. They haven't engaged with human space in decades. Exactly, Marcus frowned, which makes finding one of their children out here even more troubling. Hours passed as they monitored Nix's recovery. The child proved to be remarkably resilient, adapting quickly to the ship's environment. She began attempting human speech, her musical voice rapping carefully around unfamiliar words. "Marcus," she would say, pointing to him with a smile that lit up her entire body, patterns of joy dancing across her skin. "Juniper." Close enough. They learned more about her species through observation. The bioluminescence wasn't just communication. It was art, emotion, and memory all wrapped into one. When Nix was happy, her skin created displays that put the aurora borealis to shame. When scared, the lights would dim to barely visible pulses. But it was her curiosity that truly amazed them. Everything on the ship fascinated her. She would spend hours watching the engine room's holographic displays, her fingers tracing the patterns of energy flow. She learned to mimic them with her own bioluminescence, creating perfect replicas of the ship's systems across her skin. "She's incredibly intelligent," Juniper noted one evening, watching Nix recreate a complex diagnostic sequence through light patterns. "The way she processes information, it's like she's not just learning. She's absorbing, integrating." Marcus nodded, but his expression was troubled. "Which makes her valuable. Too valuable." They had been careful, keeping to less traveled routes, but they couldn't hide forever. Someone had tried to kill this child, and the more time they spent with her, the more convinced Marcus became that it hadn't been a random attack. Nix's nightmares confirmed his suspicions. Sometimes, in her sleep, her skin would flash with images of warfare, massive ships bearing unfamiliar insignias, weapons that tears holes in space itself. Through their growing telepathic bond, Marcus caught glimpses of political intrigue, of betrayal at the highest levels of Sethian society. This child wasn't just lost. She was being hunted. One night, as Marcus sat with Nix in the observation deck, watching the stars streak by, she shared a clearer memory. Her mother, the armored figure from before, was speaking to a council of Sethians. The debate was heated, lights flashing in angry patterns across the chamber. Then violence erupted. In the chaos, her mother had hidden her in an escape pod, sending her away with tears streaming down her face. "We'll find her," Marcus promised, as Nix curled against him, her small form trembling. "We'll make this right." But as Second Chance pushed deeper into space, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that finding Nix's mother was only the beginning. They had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rescue, and somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the stars, their enemies were closing in. The message arrived without warning, bypassing Second Chance's communication filters as if they didn't exist. The holographic display sparked to life, filling the bridge with a presence that made the air itself feel charged with electricity. High Sentinel Terra of the Sethian Empire stood before them, her indigo skin adorned with intricate patterns of light that spoke of power and authority. Her silver eyes, so like Nix's, seemed to pierce through the projection straight into Marcus's soul. "You have my daughter," she said, her voice carrying both melody and command. It wasn't a question. Marcus straightened, feeling Nix's small hand slip into his. The child's skin pulsed with a complex mixture of joy and anxiety, creating shadows that danced across the bridge. "We found her," he replied carefully. Her ship had crashed on Proxima IV. Terra's expression didn't change, but the patterns beneath her skin shifted, revealing waves of carefully controlled emotion. "You have my gratitude, Captain Rhodes, but you cannot understand the danger you're in. Try me." The High Sentinel's lights dimmed slightly, a sign Marcus had come to recognize as consideration. There are forces within the Empire who believe contact with other species will lead to our destruction. They saw my position on human relations as a threat. When I proposed opening diplomatic channels, she paused, her patterns flickering with grief. They tried to eliminate both the proposal and my line. By murdering a child, Marcus growled, his hand tightening protectively around Nyx. By eliminating a symbol, Tara corrected, though her own patterns flared with barely contained rage. My daughter represents everything they fear: change, adaptation, the end of isolation. They will not stop hunting her. Nyx stepped forward, her small form illuminated with complex patterns that Marcus had never seen before. Mother and daughter communicated in rapid bursts of light, sharing months of experience in seconds. Tara's stern expression softened as she witnessed her daughter's memories through the telepathic exchange. "You've cared for her," Tara said finally, turning back to Marcus. "Protected her, taught her." A pause. "She shows me that you understand our ways, even without the gift of light speech." "She's a remarkable teacher," Marcus replied, smiling down at Nyx. "And she deserves to be safe." Indeed, Tara's patterns shifted again, becoming more formal. "Captain Rhodes, I have a proposal, one that will either save both our peoples or doom us all." Before she could continue, alarms blared through Second Chance's corridors. Juniper's voice crackled over the intercom. "Marcus, we've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of FTL, bearing Imperial markings." Tara's expression hardened. "They found you. Listen carefully, Captain. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you know about the balance of power in this sector." Through their telepathic connection, Nyx suddenly broadcast a warning. Images of the ships that had attacked her escape pod, of faces hidden behind masks of false light, of weapons that could tear apart both ships and souls. "The purists," Tara explained quickly. "They believe they're protecting our species by eliminating all outside influence. But they're wrong. There's a greater threat coming, one that will require all sentient species to stand together." The ships were closing in. Marcus could feel Second Chance's engines straining as Juniper took them into evasive maneuvers. "Where are you?" he asked Tara. "Give us coordinates. We'll bring Nyx to you." "No." The High Sentinel's patterns pulsed with determination. "You must take her to the Nexus. The coordinates are being transmitted now. Everything you need to know will be waiting there." The transmission began to break up as energy weapons fire filled the space around them. The last thing Marcus saw was Tara's face, her expression both fierce and pleading. "Keep her safe, Marcus Rhodes. And remember, the light she carries is more than just communication. It's the key to everything." The hologram disappeared just as the first impact rocked the ship. Marcus scooped Nyx into his arms and ran for the bridge, his mind racing. The Nexus. He'd heard rumors about it, a hidden installation where various species supposedly worked together in secret. Most dismissed it as a myth. "Juniper," he called over the intercom. "Plot a course to these coordinates. Maximum speed." "Those readings can't be right," she replied, even as she adjusted their trajectory. "That would take us straight into the Void Reef." The Void Reef, a massive field of spatial anomalies that had claimed countless ships over the centuries. The perfect place to hide something you didn't want found. Nyx touched his face, sharing a vision of what waited for them there. Marcus saw impossible structures, technologies that defied understanding, and beings of pure light working alongside creatures of flesh and blood. "Hold on tight, Starlight," he murmured as Second Chance dove into the chaos of combat. "We're about to make history." Behind them, the purest ships opened fire, their weapons leaving trails of darkness against the stars. But as they ran the gauntlet of enemy fire, Marcus couldn't help but smile. He'd started this journey trying to save one child. Now he was about to help save 2 civilizations instead. The Void Reef lived up to its reputation. Massive waves of spatial distortion rolled through the darkness, warping light and matter in ways that made Marcus's eyes hurt. Second Chance shuddered as another gravitational surge hit them, the hull creaking under the strain. Structural integrity at 60%. Juniper reported from her station, fingers dancing across the controls. "We can't take much more of this." Behind them, the purest ships pressed their attack, their weapons leaving trails of unnatural darkness through the chaos. They seemed to know the safe paths through the reef, moving with practiced precision, while Second Chance was forced to improvise. Nyx stood at the bridge viewport, her skin glowing with complex patterns that shifted in rhythm with the spatial distortions. Through their telepathic bond, Marcus felt her growing excitement. She wasn't afraid. She was reading the reef itself. The patterns, he realized suddenly, they're not random. Nyx nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the swirling chaos outside. She pressed her small hands against the viewport, and her bioluminescence began to pulse in a specific sequence. Understanding flooded Marcus's mind through their connection. "The reef is artificial," he breathed. "It's a defense system." Juniper looked up sharply. "What?" "The distortions. They're generated by ancient technology. Look at how they move, how they respond to each other. It's a language written in gravity and light." As if confirming his words, Nyx's skin flared with brilliant patterns that matched the reef's fluctuations perfectly. Through their bond, she showed him the way, safe corridors hidden within the chaos, paths that only those who could read the light could find. "Hard to port," Marcus ordered. "Match her patterns." Second Chance banked sharply, following Nyx's guidance. The ship slipped through gaps in the distortion fields that seemed impossibly narrow, while behind them, the purest vessels began to falter. They know the safe routes, Marcus realized, but they don't understand why they're safe. They've lost the old knowledge. A massive surge of energy from the pursuing ships lit up the reef. The purists were done playing games. Their weapons' fire intensified, no longer trying to disable but to destroy. "They'll kill their own kind to keep their secrets," Juniper said quietly, watching Nyx guide them through the chaos. What could be worth this? The answer appeared before them as Second Chance emerged from a particularly dense field of distortions. There, suspended in the heart of the reef, was a structure that defied comprehension. It seemed to be made of pure light, its architecture flowing and shifting like a living thing. Crystalline spires stretched for kilometers in every direction, their surfaces rippling with the same patterns that danced across Nyx's skin. "The Nexus. By all the stars," Juniper whispered. But they had no time to admire the view. The purest ships had followed them through, their weapons charging for another barrage. Second Chance's shields were failing, and the nearest docking port was still kilometers away. That's when everything changed. The Nexus came alive. Patterns of light raced across its surface, matching and amplifying the signals Nyx was sending. The space around them shifted, and suddenly the pursuing ships found themselves caught in a web of gravitational forces that hadn't been there seconds before. A new voice came over their comm system, speaking in harmonics that made the air vibrate. "Welcome, children of light and shadow. You are expected." Multiple ships emerged from behind the Nexus's crystalline spires, vessels of both human and Sethian design, working in perfect coordination. The purest ships, trapped by the reef's defenses, could only watch as their quarry was escorted to safety. As they approached the docking port, Marcus felt Nyx's excitement building. She knew this place. Through their bond, she shared fragments of knowledge passed down through generations of her people, stories of a time when species worked together, sharing knowledge and resources to face threats too great for any one civilization to handle alone. "Your mother's been busy," Marcus said, watching the mix of human and Sethian crews working together on the docking platform. Nyx smiled, her patterns forming shapes that spoke of hope and reunion. But there was something else in her expression, a certainty that made Marcus uneasy. She knew something about this place, something she hadn't shared yet. As Second Chance settled into its berth, Marcus looked down at the child who had changed everything. "Ready to share the rest of your secrets, Starlight?" Nyx took his hand, her skin pulsing with patterns more complex than any he'd seen before. Through their connection, he caught a glimpse of what waited inside the Nexus, and understood why the purists were willing to kill to keep it hidden. This wasn't just a hidden base or a secret alliance. This was the future itself, written in light and shadow, waiting to be understood. The interior of the Nexus defied everything Marcus thought he knew about space stations. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with patterns of light that responded to the movements of those within. Sethians and humans worked side by side, their differences forgotten in pursuit of something greater. High Sentinel Terra was waiting for them in a vast chamber that seemed to be made of living crystal. Her ceremonial armor caught the ambient light, making her look like a being composed of pure energy. When she saw Nyx, her careful composure cracked, and mother and daughter ran to each other in a display of light and emotion that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. "Thank you," Terra said finally, looking up at Marcus while holding Nyx close. "You've done more than save a child. You've helped preserve hope itself." "About that," Marcus said, watching as Nyx's patterns synchronized with the chamber's walls. "I think it's time for the full story." Terra nodded, her expression growing serious. "Walk with me." As they moved through the station, Terra explained what the purists had tried so desperately to hide. The Sethians' gift of light speech wasn't just communication. It was the key to understanding an ancient network of technology left behind by a civilization that had transcended physical form. "The beings you call the architects," she said, gesturing to the living walls around them. "They didn't disappear. They evolved. But before they left this plane of existence, they created the Nexus as a bridge, a way for younger species to learn, grow, and eventually join them. And the purists want to keep this knowledge for themselves," Juniper concluded, watching a group of human scientists working with Sethian teachers. "No," Terra corrected. "They want to destroy it. They believe contact with other species will corrupt us, make us lose our connection to the light. They don't understand that isolation is what truly threatens that connection." Through their bond, Nyx shared images of what she had learned during her time with Marcus, how humans' capacity for adaptation and innovation complemented the Sethians' intuitive understanding of light and energy. Together, they could unlock secrets neither species could grasp alone. "That's why they tried to kill her," Marcus realized, his voice tight with anger. "She proves them wrong just by existing." Terra's patterns shifted in confirmation. "My daughter represents the future they fear, one where species learn from each other, grow together. She carries both the old knowledge and the ability to share it with those who were once considered outsiders." As if in response, Nyx's bioluminescence flared, and the chamber around them came alive with images. Marcus saw great ships sailing through the spaces between galaxies, civilizations rising and falling like waves on a cosmic ocean, and beings of pure energy reaching out to guide younger species toward their potential. "The architects left us a map," Terra explained, her voice filled with wonder. "Not just to their technology, but to our own evolution. And now, thanks to you, we have a chance to follow it." Together, Nyx added in perfect English, making everyone turn in surprise. Marcus laughed, kneeling down to her level. "Been holding out on me, Starlight." She grinned, her patterns dancing with mischief. "Learning. Always learning." The moment was interrupted by alarms. The purist ships had broken free of the reef's defenses and were mounting another attack. But this time, they faced a united response. Marcus watched in awe as human and Sethian ships moved in perfect coordination, their crews working together as if they'd trained for years. The Nexus itself came alive, its defenses activated by patterns of light that Nyx and her mother wove together. The purists never stood a chance. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the stars shone clear again, Marcus stood with his newfound family watching ships from both civilizations dock at the Nexus. More were arriving every hour, scientists, diplomats, explorers, all drawn by the promise of something greater than their individual species. "What happens now?" he asked, feeling Nyx's small hand slip into his. Terra smiled, her patterns reflecting the same hope he saw in her daughter's eyes. Now we build something new. The architects left us their knowledge. But what we do with it, that's up to us. And you'll stay?" Nix asked, looking up at Marcus with those silver eyes that had changed his life. He pretended to consider it, though they all knew his decision had been made the moment he found her in that crashed ship. "Well, someone has to keep you out of trouble, Starlight." Nix's patterns flared with joy, and through their bond, Marcus felt the future unfold, not just his own, but that of two civilizations learning to grow together. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more battles with those who feared change. But looking at the impossible family he had found, a Sethian child who spoke in light, her warrior mother who dared to dream of unity, and the human doctor who had helped make it all possible, Marcus knew every step had been worth it. Sometimes the greatest journeys began with a simple choice to help someone in need. And sometimes, just sometimes, saving one life could change the course of entire civilizations. As if reading his thoughts, Nex's patterns formed one final message, sharing it not just with him, but with everyone in the chamber. A vision of countless species reaching for the stars together, their combined light bright enough to illuminate the darkness between galaxies.